Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session today on grading in Canvas. I'm
Morning.
Dave Giberson. I know most of you, but I can see right off the bat. But just in case, I'm an old instructional design coordinator. I used to work at Online Learning Pathways for a number of years, and at the district, and they've asked me to come back and help out a little bit with this current situation and the transition to Canvas. So I'm still doing a little consulting for them, and I've been doing a lot of training on Zoom. So it's great to see you all this morning in this one about grading in Canvas and the Canvas gradebook and how to compute grades and how to grade submissions in Canvas. That's pretty much what we're going to be talking about this morning. I will be, let's just take care of a couple of Zoom meeting attendee housekeeping things so that you can participate effectively in the meeting. We've just got 8 of us in here right now, so I'm just going to leave your microphones alone. I'm not going to mute you. Some of you have muted yourselves, thanks for that, but please feel free to unmute yourself and talk at any time if you have a question or a comment. You'll find the mute button or unmute button in your Zoom menus. If you're on a computer, if you mouse over where you're seeing me, move the mouse cursor over me, the menu will pop up at the bottom of the screen, assuming it's not already there. And the mute button, unmute button is in the lower left-hand corner of those menus. A little microphone icon. It's got a red slash through it. You're muted. You can just click on that and unmute yourself at any time. There's also a push to talk feature in Zoom where you can unmute yourself temporarily by just pressing down on the space bar on your computer and talking and then letting it up when you're done, just like the push to talk button on a walkie-talkie. If you're on a mobile device, which some of you may well be, to get the Zoom menus up, just tap on the screen and you'll see the mute unmute button down in the lower left in all probability. We'll also be using the chat tool quite a bit today. I see a number of you have found that already. Thank you, and anticipated my my request for a roster. Thank you. The chat tool is just a text chat that's an adjunct to the two-way video and audio communication in Zoom, and it's handy for a lot of things. Especially handy for taking attendance in a meeting so that I can report to the powers that be on how many people I had in this meeting. They like to hear that, like to be able to report that for accreditation purposes. So if you wouldn't mind accessing the chat tool, on a computer, it's in the Zoom menu at the bottom of the screen about halfway over. And it's a little cartoon balloon labeled chat. If you click on that, a chat window will pop up. If you're on a mobile device, the chat window is usually hidden under the participants button in the Zoom menu. If you tap on participants, you'll see a list of everyone who's in the meeting. And you'll, in the lower left-hand corner of that participants window, you'll see a link to the chat tool. And that you can use that on the mobile device as well. If you wouldn't mind going into the chat tool, if you haven't already done so, I see a number of you have, and typing your name and your email address in there, so I'll be able to get back in touch with you if we have some unfinished business today. And I will be delighted to hear anything you have to say in there, or again, we're still just at 11 participants at 10:12, so that's probably close to what we're going to have today. So I'm going to encourage you just to unmute yourself and ask a question pretty much any time. That way we can get questions in context. And if it's something that I'm going to cover later, I'll just let you know. Don't worry about it.
Hey, Dave, I do have a question.
Good, Bob.
So if I make a announcement in Canvas, okay,
Hmm.
to a shell, does that go to their email address as well that they provided the school with?
That depends on their individual notification settings.
Mm,
They can choose to receive an email whenever you post an announcement or not,
I
and
see.
you can't override that. So if you want to be certain they get a message, use the inbox tool and send a blast email out to them.
And that, how, and again, while we're on that topic, Dave, let's say I go to inbox, it does have a thing where it says select a course, favorite
Right.
courses. How can I just send it out to all the different shells?
You have to send it course by course.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Uh, Dave, good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Yeah, can you please go back to module and show how we can work with modules?
I tell you what, I will, our topic this morning is grading in Canvas.
Yes, yes, I know.
And we'll touch on that on modules a bit once or twice,
Mhm.
but for setting up modules and things like that, and how to load content into them and so on, I've got a dedicated tutorial for that for you. That
Oh, okay.
I've stripped down to a minimum number of minutes, but it's about 17 minutes long. So that would take too big a chunk out of our grading discussion today. So Olga, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email right after the meeting, or as soon as I can after the meeting, I'll send you a link to that tutorial. And it
Oh,
talks about
great.
using modules and why to use modules and how to use modules and all of that. Actually, it's 2 tutorials, come to think of it. And I've stripped them down to the absolute bare minimum of length. So hopefully.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
You bet. Very well. So we're going to talk this morning about grading in Canvas. I'm going to be sharing my screen most of the session here. That's Zoom's superpower, the thing that makes it a virtual classroom as well as just a video chat tool. And I'll do that now. And here's our outline for today. I've introduced myself. First thing I always try to do in these sessions is show you how to get extra help beyond this session with whatever topic we're covering. And the gradebook is no exception. There's a tremendous amount of explanatory material provided by Canvas about the gradebook. So let me pull up Canvas here. And if you go to the Help button in Canvas, there's an option to search the Canvas guides. And there are instructor guides as well as student guides, so you can refer your students for help with Canvas here as well. But under instructor guides, which are arranged by subject, there is an entire section on grades, and there are over 24 tutorials on how to use the gradebook. So just about everything you could possibly want to know about the gradebook and handling grades in Canvas is covered here. The trick, of course, is figuring out which tutorial has the exact information you need, but they are very well done and very easy to use. They are just text and screenshot tutorials, which are very efficient. So it's you're never without help on this topic. You're also, of course, always welcome to email me or to call your Canvas support hotline. Your faculty hotline is right here under the Help button as well. 844-612-7422. The students have one at 7421. They have been rather busy lately, as you can well imagine, given the circumstances, but they will get back to you. You may have to wait for access to that. But again, you're always welcome to email me when you have a question as well about the grade book or anything else for that matter. We're going to take a look at the structure of the grade book and how it's laid out, how to navigate it. Going to look at how you enter grades, how you compute final grades, and we're also going to look at the process of grading in Canvas for the 3 types of gradable assessments that you can use in Canvas. The quiz, a quiz to Canvas is any kind of a test, from a pop quiz to a final exam. So quizzes, homework assignments, or gradable discussions. And we'll look at how to grade each of those from the grade book. So let's get started with a look at the grade book. Need that. Sorry. And I've prepared a little sandbox course here that we can use today, where we can tinker with this to our heart's content without doing any harm to anything that's actually running. And in your Canvas course menu, you'll have a link for grades. The students have this link too, but that link does not give them access to your grade book. It gives them access to a list of their own grades only. They cannot see your grade book, even part of it.
It better not.
Yeah, well, I get that question a lot. What do you mean the students can see my grade? No. So the grade book in Canvas by default shows up as a fairly standard ledger type grade book with each row representing a student and each column representing a graded item, an assessment in your course. Again, either a quiz, a homework assignment, or a graded discussion. Each cell will potentially contain a grade for a student for that assessment. So it's pretty familiar layout. At the far right-hand end of the grade book, normally, there's a total column that gives you your computed grade for that student. Computed grades start showing up immediately upon you entering grades into the grade book, and Canvas calculates those on a running average. It only considers assessments that the students have attempted and or been graded for. Things that students haven't turned in don't affect that total, and there's no way you can make, there's no setting that you can change to make that happen. It's always a running total. So it's possible that a student who's missed several assignments, but it's a fact that a student who's missed several assignments that should have been turned in will not have those counted against them unless you manually enter a 0 into the box for the missed assessment for them. So that's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, students can get an inflated view of how well they're doing in the class, and so can you. So the total column is usually all the way out to the right here. And in between, we have the standard grade columns that you'd expect. Okay, let's see. I need to bring my outline back up here so I don't get lost.
Sorry, Dave.
Yes,
Sorry,
go
Dave.
right ahead.
This is Lale. Can I make the screen bigger? I can't see the grades very well. It's too small.
Are you on a computer or a mobile device?
Laptop.
I'm sorry?
On a laptop.
Computer.
Laptop computer.
The laptop computer.
Yeah.
Make sure that your window in which the share is appearing is set to go full screen.
Yeah, I'm on full screen, but I see a lot of you. Half of the screen are the participants, and then the other half is too small. I can't. Maybe I need glasses. It's okay.
I'm sorry, it should be showing it more or less the same size that I'm seeing it.
No, it's too
It is a
small.
little faint at times. I can actually bring this, I can make this a little bigger for you.
There
Does
is
that
the,
help?
there is
Did
the
that help?
view,
Good.
there is the view option at the top of the computer. Maybe she should try that.
See, I'm on full screen.
Oh, yes, and in your
I
little
see.
bar, settings bar at the top of the screen, there is an
Oh.
option.
Oh, there. Thank you.
There,
I was
that
on
helps.
side by
Excellent.
side. I was on side by side. I removed it. Now I can see. Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can bump this up a little bit in size too, so that may help some as well. Okay. First question might be, how do we get grades in here? Well, you can enter grades manually in any of these cells just by clicking on the cell and typing in a number. That's not something you will usually do unless you're overriding a grade or perhaps entering a 0 for a student who didn't turn something in. So here I have some students who have not taken this syllabus quiz. I can just type a 0 in for them and press enter, and that will inform Canvas that they missed that assignment. You can always change that later at need. Let's just take a look at the various views of the gradebook we can get. And a little later, we'll talk about the more normal process of grading, of actually getting numeric grades into these grade cells. You can view the gradebook using this little gradebook menu here, either in the default view that you're seeing now, or an individual view where you see the grades for a single student if you're focusing on a single student. That's not commonly all that useful, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And the gradebook history will give you a look at the grading that you have done and tell you when you did things and so on, but not that terribly useful, usually. So usually you're going to spend most of your time in this default standard gradebook view. You can govern, let's see, the order in which you see these gradebook columns. The default, the arrange by option here under the view menu is set by default to default order, which is the order that the assignments are listed in your assignments tool in the course menu. And you can change this, and that will change the order of the columns in the gradebook if you have the gradebook set to display in default order. But you can also arrange by alphabetically by assessment name. This should say assessment name, not assignment name. These are not all homework assignments. They're quizzes, homework assignments, and gradable discussions. Canvas does a very poor job of using the word assignment to mean multiple things in different contexts. You can also list them by due date, chronologically. You can list them by you can have the most impactful assessments listed first or last, the ones with highest point values, or you can group them by the modules in your modules tool, or you can just leave them, and you can change the order that you see these gradebook columns in simply by dragging them back and forth. So it's very easy for you to arrange these columns in a manner that makes sense to you. That will not necessarily affect the order in which the students see the grades in their grades tool, but they have control over that locally, so you don't have to worry about that. You can't enforce the order in which the students see their grades any more than they can see your gradebook. Columns in the gradebook are created, the vast majority of the columns in your gradebook will be created automatically for you when you create an assessment in your Canvas course, when you create a quiz, or you create a homework assignment, or you make a discussion forum gradable. A column for those gradable assessments will automatically be created in your gradebook. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. It is possible to create columns in the gradebook manually if you need to, but it requires a little bit more of a workaround than we used to have to do in Blackboard. In Blackboard, we had a button right here on the main gradebook display that said new column. We could just make one, but you can't do that in Canvas. In Canvas, you have to, in order to make a manual gradebook column, and you might ask, well, why would I need to do that? Well, there may be some assignment or some activity in a class for which you want to record grades that does not go through Canvas, that is not satisfied in Canvas, or not done in Canvas, in which case Canvas won't make a gradebook column for it. Let's say you might, this would be more common in a classroom course, which we don't have any of right now, but let's say I know a faculty member who used to require the students to return a pledge along with the syllabus saying that they would not cheat. And they had to mail it to it. And rather than have them do it through Canvas, he just had them hand it to him in class, or mail it, email it, or snail mail it. And he just wanted a column in Canvas to check off that had been done. So he had to have a manually created column. So also this comes into play if you start using Canvas in the middle of a semester, like where many people are doing right now. This gives you a way to manually create columns for assessments that were satisfied before you started using Canvas, so that you can record those grades and report them to the students and have them included in any grade computations if you decide to use your Canvas gradebook to compute your final grades. So it's useful to be able to make manual columns in Canvas. To do that, you go in your course menu to the Assignments tool, which is kind of poorly named. Again, it should say Assessments, not Assignments, because the Assignments tool is a list of all of the gradable stuff in your course, all of the quizzes, all of the homework assignments, all of the gradable discussions by default in the order in which they were created by you. The assignments may or may not be subdivided into assignment groups. Getting a little background noise. I tell you, I'm going to mute everyone, but please feel free to unmute yourself whenever you want to talk. Remember, you can just press the space bar on your computer if you're using a computer to speak, and I'll hear you. We were just getting a little background noise there, and that can happen. The and it's in the assignment tool that you can create a dummy assignment that will manually produce a gradebook column in the gradebook. You do that by clicking on the Add Assignment button here in the upper right. Give the assignment a name. I'm just going to call this manual column, so I know what I did. There's usually no need for a description. You can put a point value on it, assuming it's something that's actually going to contribute to the course grade. Or you can leave it at 0 if it's an extra credit activity, or if it's not meant to affect the course grade. You can also make that happen, that is, not affect the course grade, by clicking this box here that says, don't count this assignment toward the final grade. We'll talk about assignment groups in a little while. Yeah, and you can display grades in a number of ways. Points is the default, but you can do this as a percentage of possible points, as just complete, incomplete, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, check, X, whatever, just a check off column. You can display grades as a letter grade, or on the GPA scale, like 4.0 to 0. Or you can set it to be not graded, and you may use this column for something entirely different. The submission type in the case of a manual column would most likely be no submission, because this is not something that's being done through Canvas. We're just making a blank gradebook column that you can type stuff into. So no submission would be the norm there in this case. And if you just leave the default assigned to everyone, then everyone will get this column. And then you can just clear, that's all you have to do really then, is just name the column, optionally set a number of points, set submission type to no submission, and save it. Oh yeah, save it and publish it. Because if you don't publish it, it won't show up in the gradebook. Publish means make visible to students. So if it, and in this case, if you don't publish the manual column, it won't show up in the gradebook yet. Now, if we go back to the gradebook by clicking the grades link in the course menu, we'll find that manual column usually all the way out to the right here. And there it is. And you can enter grades into this. You're not limited to the number of points possible, you said. You can always enter more or less. You can enter zeros. And very quickly, you can enter grades manually into this. So if you're creating a column for, say, a test that was taken before we switched to temporary and remote instruction, you can just enter those grades out of your paper gradebook or wherever else you have them very quickly in the Canvas. And then your students will be able to see those grades in their grades tool in Canvas, and those grades can be included in your grade computation. And you can move this column wherever you like. Just wherever it makes sense in the context of your gradebook. So that's how you create manual columns for entering grades that weren't earned in Canvas. Let's see, you've got a question here. Do students have to have a Canvas account? Yes, if you're using Canvas with your students, they would all have to have a Canvas account. But the good news is they already have one. They're automatically, one is automatically generated for them when they register for their first course at the district. And then they keep that account all the way through their experience, their time at the district. Their access is exactly the same as yours. Their username is their 10-digit student ID, and their password is set initially to their 8-digit birth date, month, day, year. So your students all have access to Canvas right now. Anybody who's registered in your courses right now automatically has access to Canvas and access to the shells, the containers in Canvas for your courses. If you haven't published the course, they won't be able to access the course, but they are enrolled in it. And as soon as you publish the course, they'll have access to it. That's an important question. So I wanted to deal with that right now. Um, okay, so that's how we make a manual grade column. Let's see. Let's go through the gradebook configuration options here and so on as well while we're doing this. Under the View button, we can filter gradebook display, the gradebook display. In other words, which columns you see at any given time by assignment groups, and we'll talk more about those in a moment, by modules or student groups, probably not student groups at this point. But we can like click modules here, and then we get a box here that says, okay, which columns do you want to see? Well, if you have content modules set up in your modules tool, you can say, well, I only want to see the gradebook columns for topic 1. And the gradebook suddenly gets a lot simpler. So it makes it easy to find things in a hurry rather than have to scroll back and forth so much. Or I can go back to all modules and restore my view. That doesn't change anything permanently. It just changes what you see at that moment. We can also create what's called a notes column here. That by default appears just to the right of the student name column. And you can make it bigger or smaller as need be. And this is just a free text column where you can write notes to yourself about a particular student. Like this student is in the hospital and is going to be out for a week or something like that. Or this student had some issues with an assignment, plagiarism or whatever. You can make notes like that here just by clicking into the cell for that student in the notes column and typing something and saving it. And you can do that, and the students will never see that. That is for you only. So that's a handy little annotation thing that you can use to remind yourself. You can also, at any time, back up your gradebook. And this is a good idea to do from time to time. Not that we have ever known Canvas to lose any grades in the 3 or 4 years we've been playing with it so far. It's exceptionally unlikely, but it will give you a copy of your gradebook that you can access offline. It exports a file that can be imported into Excel or any other spreadsheet. To export your gradebook, you just click Export, and the export starts. And then a file save box will pop up, and you can choose where to save this gradebook export. I think I have a folder for that somewhere. Yeah. And I can just save that there. And then I can open that up in Excel or another spreadsheet. You can also, after manipulating that, you can also import it back in if you so choose, but it's much more common to just use this to just back up your gradebook. This is especially useful to do at the end of the term so that you'll have a quick reference to any grades in case there are questions after the close of the term. You'll still have access to your Canvas shells, but your students won't. So after a certain period, so that can be useful to have that handy. Okay, so that's how you back up your gradebook.
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
can I see what that Excel file looks like, the exported one?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me pull that up. There it is. Just double click that. And here's what it looks like in Excel. Has all the information there. These are test students, that's why their names are not especially informative. And of course, you can expand columns and so on to make it more readable. All that.
Thank
So
you.
that's what that looks like. You bet. Good question. All righty. Okay. You have some control over how grades display in these columns. There's a context menu associated with each column, which you only see if you mouse over the column header here. And you get these three little vertical dots, a menu button. You can sort the entire grade book by this column, by grade, low to high, or missing, or late, so that you can see who's, you can compare grades and you can see who's missing assignments very easily. Maybe one of the most powerful tools in this menu is the one that allows you to send a message, an inbox message, an email basically, to any students who meet certain criteria, like haven't yet submitted this particular assignment, or haven't been graded, or scored less than a certain amount on that assignment, or more than a certain amount on that assignment. So you can send messages of both concern and congratulation to different groups, presumably. All at the same time, you don't have to select each individual student as a recipient for an inbox message. You can automatically say anybody who scored more than 5 points will get this message. So useful. And a great way to encourage students and to catch potential problems very quickly. There is a grade curving tool. I don't recommend it. It can produce unexpected results. You might play with that someday in a sandbox course or something before you try to do that, if you decide to. The default grade really doesn't do you much good. You can hide the grades for a particular column from the students if you so wish. And you can enter grades either in terms of points or percentage. The default is points, and that's probably be the one you use most commonly. And grade posting policy, I'd probably leave at the default, which is just to make the grades available to the students as soon as you post them. But you can change it so that you can enter all the grades before you let any students see their grades. Well, that's probably a lot more fuss than it's worth. Just a personal opinion. So those are things you can do with those context menus there. Let's go look at the total column now, which is the grade columns are pretty straightforward. But what about the total column? What does that tell you? How is that total arrived at? And what can you do to affect that? Well, first off, the total column does have its own context menu. If we look at that, you can sort the grade book by this total column, which is very useful, especially at the end of the term when you're assigning grades. You can sort this by grades low to high or high to low, and it makes it very easy to decide where the breakpoints are between letter grades. You can display this either by points, as points, or as percentages. And you can move this column, if you prefer, you can move this column up to the front where it's displayed just to the right of the student column. So it's easier to keep track of which student you're talking about when you're looking, or which student's total you're looking at. Though, of course, the student name column is always displayed in the grade book, and the others slide past it. So the student name column is locked in place. So it's fairly easy to see whose total is what, or whose total is what.
Dave,
Yes.
what is that 337.5% for test 5?
Apparently I have entered an extravagant grade. Where
Okay.
that student,
I'm
that's
like, what? Oh, you got a 10 out of 0.
yeah. This one was set to be
Yeah.
this
Okay.
assignment was set to be extra credit with a point value of 0. That's how you make something extra credit, is set a possible points of 0. And this student has very few other grades, only one other grade, as a matter of fact, at this time. And none of these others that the student hasn't completed are held against them. So the student has like 13.5 points out of a possible 4 points right now.
Okay.
So that's obviously an indication that maybe somebody might have messed up somewhere. Always a possibility. Okay, so that's basic control over the total column. But how is that total column computed? Well, by default, when you first get your gradebook, the way it's set up is that Canvas will take the number, the points earned, total points earned by that student, divide it by the total possible points up to that point in the course, or the total possible points for assessments that that student has attempted, and multiply by 100, simple percentage. Again, this does not take into account the fact that the student may not have turned in some stuff they should have turned in. So it's important, if you want this total to be currently valid, to enter zeros for any unsubmitted assignments that should have been submitted by that point. And then the zeros will be taken into account. The points possible for that assignment will be applied to the denominator of the fraction, and the student's grade will reflect their current efforts rather than be artificially inflated. But the total column will just keep a running tab on how the student is doing in the course. That's the default situation. In that situation, of course, in order to make that make sense, we need to think about how the individual assessments are weighted in their contribution to the final grade. How important is one assessment to the final grade versus another? Like a pop quiz and a final exam wouldn't have the same impact, presumably, on the course grade. They'd be weighted differently in the final computation. So the question becomes, okay, how do I tell Canvas how much weight to apply to a particular assessment? And conceptually, the simplest way to do that is simply to apply an appropriate number of possible points to each quiz, each homework assignment, and each graded discussion as I create them. When you create a homework assignment or a graded discussion, you're asked to specify the points possible for that assessment. And if, say, a particular homework assignment should have twice the impact on the grade that a graded discussion does, you'd make sure that the points possible for the homework assignment were at least double that of the graded discussion. Quizzes, the total points in a quiz is determined by the number of points awarded to each question in the quiz. So you have to carefully choose in that event how many points to award to each question in your test so that the total points possible for the test come out to the right value. But if you do that for every quiz and every homework assignment and every graded discussion, if you make sure that the possible points for each one of those is appropriate, then when Canvas does the simple percentage computation that I described, then each of those different assessments will provide an appropriately weighted contribution to that final grade. And that's conceptually very simple. You just go through and you assign the right number of points to each quiz, each homework assignment, each graded discussion, and then the percentage works out. But that can be complex. You have a lot of decisions to make to set the appropriate number of possible points. You have to decide, well, what should the weight of this pop quiz be relative to a chapter test or the final exam? Should the final exam have 50 points where the pop quiz is only worth 5 or something like that? A lot of decisions to make, especially with quizzes, because you have to decide with every question in the quiz, how many points should I award for that question in order to make the total possible points for the test come out to be something that makes sense in terms of my overall weighting scheme for individual assessments. So there's a lot of thinking and figuring, and you sometimes end up in tests with questions having fractional point values in order to have them meet some chosen desired number of total points for the test. It all gets, there's a lot of setup involved there. So there is another way to have Canvas compute grades for you that is conceptually a little bit more complicated, but in practice takes a whole lot less time to set up. And that involves weighting various assessments by what are called assignment group. To see what an assignment group is and how to create one and what it looks like and how to use it, we have to go to the assignments tool in the course menu in Canvas. By default, when you first get your Canvas course, let me go to another course and show you what that would look like. I think this one is probably still set as it comes. Yeah. In a brand new Canvas shell, all of your assignments in the assignments tool are listed in one so-called assignment group. That group is called assignments, plural. And then every gradable item you create in the course just appears below that automatically, either regardless of whether you create it here or you create it using the quizzes tool or create it through the modules, as I showed in earlier sessions about creating content and assessments in Canvas and so on. Everything ends up in one so-called assignment group, one SAC, and they're all treated, you know, there's no distinction between different types or values of assignments. That's the default situation. You can, however, create assignment groups and subdivide these assignments into related groups, which is what I've done in this course we were in here for our class today. Go to the assignments tool again, and I've subdivided my assessments into 3 groups: tests, quizzes, whatever, gradable discussions, and homework assignments. And I have assorted the different items among those. Like my manual column here actually ended up under tests, but that may or may not have been appropriate. Maybe that was more of an assignment, homework assignment. I could drag that down into my homework assignments group here. So you can, it's very easy to assort these things between the assignment groups once you create them. And you can certainly have more assignment groups than this. You could for instance, subdivide tests between maybe weekly quizzes and chapter tests. And you might have a separate group that was just the final exam. That's was nothing in it but the final exam. And you can subdivide homework assignments by, you might have a term paper that counted much more than everything else, all the other assignments, and that could be in an assignment group all by itself, where you could just add a group and call it term paper and save it. And then if there were a final, let's see, there's not like a term paper in this course, but you could drag that down into the term paper category. And that's not appropriate in this particular course, so I'm going to delete that. But, he said, I have to be very careful not to move the mouse when I do that. There we go. But you have the option to subdivide your gradable assessments as finely, as granularly as you like. Why would you bother? Well, it does help you keep track of things, and you can see where the related assessments are in the assignments tool. And it will allow you to display them in groups in the gradebook. But the real reason for making assignment groups, the most impactful reason for making assignment groups in the assignments tool, is to allow you to weight your grades by these groups rather than by individual assignments. If you do that, the exact number of possible points for each assessment doesn't really matter. You could give everything a total possible points, say, of 100. Or you could just let total points for tests be whatever worked out when you assign an appropriate number of points to each question in the test. You don't have to worry about, well, is this, this pop quiz should be half the value of that chapter test, or a third of the value of that chapter test, or whatever, because you can make a separate group for your chapter tests and your pop quizzes, so 2 separate groups, and you can weight those groups. You can weight at the group level rather than the individual assessment level. And that is so easy to set up. Once you have your assignment groups set up and you made the decisions about what goes in each group and how many groups you're going to have, you can very easily weight your final grades by clicking on this little menu icon in the upper right-hand corner of the assignments tool and selecting assignment groups weight. You do have to tell Canvas, okay, I want to weight my final grade by assignment group. Then you get a list of your groups and a percentage in a box to type in a percentage that group should account for in your final grading scheme. We often do this in our syllabi, right? We say, okay, your pop quizzes will be worth 10% of your grade, your chapter exams will be worth 30%, your homework assignments will be worth 40%, and your final exam worth whatever's left, and so on, or however you typically weight your grades. we tell them that in the syllabus. Well, you can move that process right here into your assignment group weights. I'm weighting my tests at 30% of the grade, discussions at 20, and the assignments at 50. I don't have a final exam on this course, so I don't have that in here. The only stipulation here is that these have to add up to 100%. So you just save that, and now it'll show the assignment group's weight in the assignments tool here. And now you don't care how many possible points you've assigned to each individual assessment, because Canvas just looks at each individual assessment, looks at the number of points the student got versus the possible points for that assessment, and computes an assessment percentage for that particular column. And says for the points available from this particular column, the student got 80%. So it doesn't matter what the actual point values are, just the percentage is all that matters. And then it combines all those percentages for all those assessment columns in the grade book and weights them according to the assignment group that grade book column belongs to. It does all the weighted average computations for you and things like that, so that you don't have to get out your calculator.
Dave?
Yes.
Lale. One of the things I recognize is that even though you put weights like for test and discussion, now within test, it goes with points. So, and this is something that Blackboard did really well, and Canvas is not doing well. So what I had to do is I had to do each of the tests in their own category for the percentages to work. So like on your test, your 10-point Y screencasting quiz is going to count double the quiz for Jing and screencast.com.
Well, yeah, but in the way I'm doing it here, that's not so. The Y screencasting quiz has no more weight than any of the other quizzes.
I think
the number of points in the quiz doesn't matter, because Canvas is just going to count the percentage grade for that quiz and then combine it with the other percentage grades in this assignment group and do a weighted average computation. So no, it doesn't matter how many points. If you group tests that have that should have the same weight together in an assignment group, it doesn't matter how many points each test
Are you
is
sure?
worth.
Because that's not how it worked for me. Because for each assignment group, you can give that a try later, but the way it was working is that within each assignment group, even though you're saying 30% total, it does 30% total, but it goes by points again, because that's its default. So you have to kind of separate them if you want them to have just percentages by themselves.
Well, if I wanted this Y screencasting quiz to count twice as much as any of the other quizzes, yes, I would have to put it into its own assignment group to do this. But if that's not the case, if that quiz should have the same weight as any of the others, despite it having twice as many points, then I don't have to do that. I can just leave it in this assignment group, and Canvas will take that into account and will do the computation for you automatically. So each one of these quizzes could have a different number of points in them, and yet Canvas would appropriately weight all of them by assignment group without that having any impact on the final grade. It will. And this actually is just about exactly the same way that weighting by categories worked in Blackboard. So this is just basically the same process that we used in Blackboard when we weighted grades by categories rather than weighting them by individual assessment. So it's very similar to the situation we had in Blackboard. and the options are very similar. They're just implemented slightly. The screens look a little different, but the process is the same. And the advantages of doing it each way are the same. Here, you don't have to worry when you're creating a test how many exact points are in that test. You can just let that fall where it may. You do have to worry about the weights of the individual questions within a test, of course. So an essay question might be worth twice as much as a multiple choice question or something like that. But for the total points for the test, it doesn't matter. Again, each one of these could have a different number of points, and the grade would be computed with 30% of the total grade awarded from these tests. Yes,
Can you
absolutely,
apply,
that's true. That's how this is, why this is so handy.
Dave, can you apply this to grades you already have put in if you separate into a group?
Yeah, you can create your assignment groups or edit or change them at any time and reassort stuff between them, and Canvas will automatically recompute everything for you instantly. So you can say, you don't have to set this up from first day of the term. You can change this at any time.
Sorry, Dave, let me just make sure I understand this. So under test, 5 assignments under test, right? 5
There are 5 quizzes.
quizzes, yes, within test. Is Canvas now counting them all the same weight, or is it
Yes.
weighted points?
Yes. Nope, it's weighting them all the same.
Okay, thank you.
Let's say a student got 2 points on the quiz, this quiz. That would be a 4, that would be 40%, right? And the student got 4 points out of 10 on this quiz, on the Why Screencasting quiz. That would be 40% too. So those 2 grades would contribute exactly the same amount to the final total grade or total percentage, regardless of the fact that this quiz is overall worth 10 points and that one is worth 5. So it's just a matter of when Canvas computes the percentages, basically. Here it's computing them at every individual assessment, whereas in the case of where you weight individual assessments by giving each one a different number of points, and you don't set assignment group weights, then Canvas just adds up all of the earned points and all of the possible points and does the percentage once for the total column. Here it's computing percentages in every column and then doing a fairly complex weighted average type computation to get the final grade, which you don't have to worry about. You just have to trust Canvas, but it will work. And it's a lot easier to set up in the long run because you don't have to worry about the fact that this quiz has twice as many points as that one. They'll still be given the same weight in the final exam or final total. Honest. And again, that's exactly how it worked in Blackboard too, with grade categories. Canvas just uses the term assignment group, where Blackboard used the term grade category, but they work exactly the same. It's actually easier to set this up in Canvas than it was in Blackboard, which is not unusual given the way the 2 systems are designed. But I much prefer doing it this way because then I don't have to worry about how many. And with discussions and homework assignments, I just make them all 100 points. It's easier to conceptualize, to give partial credit that way, or make them all 10 points. I mean, it wouldn't matter. Or you could have each one have a different number of points, and Canvas will just compute percentages for each one. And so you just don't have to worry about the number of possible points at all. You just make it whatever's convenient for you in grading. And Canvas does the weighting for you by assignment group. I know it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around, but it works, and it's a lot easier to set up in the long run. So that's one of the major concepts today in this class, and it's one of the things that we tend to spend more time talking about. All righty. Another nice thing about assignment groups, creating assignment groups, is that it gives you the option to drop the lowest grade or grades within an assignment group. You can go to the top of the assignment group, right to the right of where you see the total or total weighting, and click on this menu item and edit the assignment group. One of the things you can do there is change the name if you want to, and change the total weight or the percentage weight for that group if you wish. But down below that, you have the option to select how many grades you want to drop from the lowest. You can drop one lowest grade or more. If you had a lot of assessments in that, you might even drop more than one. To be totally fair and totally rational in removing outliers from a student's performance, you can also drop highest scores. Like if the student just got really lucky and one score was way above all the others, or maybe they weren't entirely honest or whatever, you can drop highest scores too. Though be prepared for a lot of pushback if you do that. I've never had the nerve to do that in 45 years of teaching. I know there are arguments for doing that, for taking out, if you're going to drop the lowest grade, you ought to drop the highest grade too, to get a more realistic view of the student's performance. I wish you luck explaining that to the students and dodging the torches and pitchforks that will appear outside your door when you do it. So more likely than not, you might drop the lowest grade in a group. You can also, if there's an assignment or if there's an assessment within that assignment group that you really don't want dropped, that's critical, you can tell Canvas not to drop that one, no matter what, even if it's the lowest. So that's how you drop the lowest grade in Canvas within an assignment group. So you might have a whole series of weekly quizzes, and rather than have students have to make up a missed quiz, you can just tell them that, okay, I'll drop the lowest one. If you miss one, that's your lowest one, and it won't impact your grade. Okay, any questions about that? Or any more questions about weighting assignment groups? I know that's a little bit hard to grasp, but I promise you it will work, regardless of whether all of the assessments within an assignment group have the same point value. They'll still all be treated equally in the final grade. I hope I've convinced you of that. If not, get back in touch with me earlier. I'll try more. Okay. You can have, let's go back to the grade book for a second. You can have Canvas automatically compute letter grades for you. Let's first talk about letter grades in the total column. In order to have Canvas automatically do that and display those both to you and to the students, we can go to, and notice, just to show you that things did change when I went to that assignment group weighting. Remember, this student had like a 200% value or something. Now this is more in line. So that did make a difference. in order, of course, to have Canvas automatically assign letter grades for you in the totals column, you have to tell Canvas where your cutoffs are. What's the lowest grade you can make and get an A, or lowest percentage you can have and make an A, and B and C and so on. You set up your, it's called a grading scheme, and you in Canvas, and to set that up, you go to the settings link in your course menu and go to the course details tab, as opposed to navigation or whatever here, and scroll down and look for the grading scheme. By default, this will be unchecked. So you check that, and you get the option to select a grading scheme. I've already selected one, so it's going to let me look at what I selected, but I can change my mind at any time. I just click on that link and I see what my current grading scheme is, which is the usual 190, 80, 70, 60 ABCDF cutoffs. But you are by no means bound to that. That's our so-called standard grading scheme. You can select another scheme that's already created on the system if you like, but that is the only one we have is this standard scheme, and that's the one you just looked at. That's the only one we have in there right now. But if that's not your choice, you can manage grading schemes and create a new one. This is the standard scheme that we see here that you've seen, but you can add a grading scheme of your own. You'd give it a name, and then you decide where your own cutoffs are. And you decide whether you want to use pluses and minuses. At the district, of course, that's not, you can't enter pluses and minuses, but doesn't mean you couldn't keep them in your own records, and then just when you enter final grades, obviously an A plus, an A, and an A minus would all be an A in the district scheme. And you can't alter that, but you can keep records of your own if you prefer. Or you can take out the pluses and the minuses just by clicking the X's here and get everything down to A, B, C, D, F. And then you can set your own cutoffs for an A. Maybe you want a 92 instead of a 90. And so on. And then when you're done, you just save the scheme, and that will become the one that's automatically used for this course for you in Canvas. You do have to set the grading schemes course by course. You can't just say, well, do this for all my courses, unfortunately. I don't think, anyway. So that's how to manage, how to activate and manage grading schemes, and pick the one you want. If you just want the standard 90, 80, 70, 60 cutoffs, you can just enable grading scheme, and that's the one that will be enabled by default because that's the default for the entire system. And indeed, the only one stored for the entire system. And once you make these changes, you just update course details, and now Canvas will automatically display a letter grade in the totals column. You can also have Canvas display letter grades for any particular column by selecting integrate, let's see. No, I'm sorry, you have to choose that. Come to think of it, you have to choose that in the assignment. Like, let's pick an assignment here. Find screencasting. I can go to that assignment screen by clicking on its name in the gradebook, which is kind of handy, saves time finding it, and edit this assignment. And there is an option to decide how the grade is displayed for this assignment. and letter grade is one of the options. So you can select that, and the students would see a letter grade in there. Though the number, the point value that has been entered into that cell one way or another by you will remain in the background and will be used for computation. So you don't have to worry about that. That's unlikely that that's going to be something that people are going to pick, but the capability is there as long as you have that grading scheme set.
So
and active.
Dave, if
Yes.
I manually put in grades, will it still do that if I have it set up?
Yes. If
Okay.
you manually enter the point values, yeah, it'll still do that.
Or if I just
And you,
if I manually
go
put
ahead.
A for an assignment they did in the past, but I've set up weighting, will it do that?
No, you have to enter the point, if you're entering grades manually, you have to enter them by points in order for the computations to work properly.
Okay.
But you can have them display as letter grades to the students and to you. No, Blackboard had a scheme where it would automatically provide, if you typed in an A, it would give them a 95, saying if you had the standard grading scheme set. But Canvas, to my knowledge, doesn't do that. And it was not especially useful in Blackboard, I ever thought so. That's not something we miss a whole lot.
So one more thing on that. So if I have
Yes.
put grades in as letters, like I created the dummy boxes for my old assignments, and then
Right.
I put them in as letters, I need to go back and do those as points.
Points, right. If you want Canvas to do the grade computation for you, yeah.
So even though I have that in a category that's weighted, I still need to put some kind of points in there.
I think if you selected letter grade as the point display and typed in a letter that I actually haven't tried that, so I'm not absolutely certain what would happen, but my impression is that what would happen is that that your computations would not be reliable in that event. Because an A might mean anything but right between 90 and 100.
Right.
So
if I'm good with
if you
that,
want
though, it might be.
Pardon?
If I'm good with that, it might be okay.
I honestly don't think it will factor in those grades at all in the computation, but I haven't tested that. That's something I need to try. That's a good question, but you're much safer entering those as points.
So I could just
and that gives you much finer control over how much credit each student gets, certainly.
Yeah, well, I don't think I want to do that with 140 students.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean.
Several past
Yeah.
assignments.
Yeah. Gotcha. It would be interesting to try that with your test student and enter just nothing but letter grades and see what the computation looks like. I'm going to try that too, because that's not a question that come up before. So that's an interesting question. Do me a favor and email me and remind me, and I'll let you know what I find out.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Grading schemes, letter grades. All right. We've exported. We talked about imports, manual columns. Okay, that's good. We're in good shape here. That pretty much covers the management of the grade book that I would care to talk about right now. Let's talk a little bit about the process of grading in Canvas now. How do you get numbers into these columns here, assuming you're displaying grades as points? Well, one way we've seen is you can just click on the cell and enter a number. If somehow you just know what that student did, you know, like Karnak, and know exactly what that student did on that assignment. But that's not generally very useful. You need to evaluate the student's submission, obviously, and you need to look at it. And if you had the assignment handed into you on paper, you'd look at it and you'd mark it up and you assign a grade, and then you just type the grade into the column here, and you have that capability. But what if the assignment is submitted to you in Canvas? Well, yeah, you can go and look at it, but then do you have to then come back here and then manually enter the grade? And the answer is no. You're going to use the grading interface in Canvas, which is called the speed grader. And I've got a few submissions in this grade book here that we can go through and grade and see how that works. Obviously, a lot of these test students are really falling down on the job. A lot of them haven't submitted a lot of assignments, but we've got just enough of them to illustrate the process of grading assignments in Canvas. Grading homework assignments, grading graded discussions, and in certain cases, grading quizzes. And you say, wait a minute, I thought Canvas graded quizzes for me. Well, Canvas can grade objective questions in quizzes. Multiple choice, matching, true, false, fill in the blank, things like that, Canvas can grade for you. But essay questions, Canvas can't grade. It's not smart enough yet. We don't want to be around when Canvas gets that smart, because their need for us is going to considerably be reduced. I'm not looking forward to, fortunately, I will probably not live to see that. Some of you may have that experience, I hope not. But when artificial intelligence gets to the point where Canvas can grade an essay question, we're in trouble. And I hate to tell you this, but there are AI tools out there that are being used and have been used to grade writing assignments. The efficacy of those tools is highly controversial at this point in time, but the fact that they exist at all is kind of worrisome. This was one of the things that was developed for MOOCs, and massive open online courses, where people would have 100,000 students in a course at Harvard or something online, and their writing assignments would be graded automatically by this artificial intelligence. And some people say those things actually work reasonably well, but thank God that's not been built into Canvas yet. Because the next step, of course, is the AI teaching the course too. I'd like to think that that's a science fiction pipe dream, but I've seen too many science fiction pipe dreams come true in my life to this point to be entirely comfortable about it. But for now, at least, Canvas can't grade your essay questions. You have to grade those manually, and I'll show you how to do that. And we'll revel in the fact that it's necessary for now. But let's first talk about homework assignments. One thing I'm not as enamored about in Canvas is being able to readily distinguish the different types of assessments here. This is a homework assignment, but I can't tell by looking at it. And there's nothing in this menu that tells me, overtly at least, that this is a homework assignment. One way to find out is to go and look at the assessment by clicking on its name in the grade book. And I look at this and I say, oh, okay, this tells me that's an assignment, just by, I recognize that this is an assignment. But that's not immediately obvious if I don't remember that. And I find that I remember less and less every year, so that can be a little off-putting. You can go to view here and filter actually, you cannot filter by assignments. Well, yeah, I can filter by assignment group. And if I've assigned all my homework assignments to my group called assignment, then Canvas is going to display to me only gradebook columns that are in fact homework assignments. So that's one way to avoid this uncertainty. But so this is a homework assignment. Homework assignments in Canvas, of course, are generally satisfied by the student either uploading a file that contains their work on that assignment to Canvas, or typing something into a text box that you provide to them within the assignment. So probably what I'm going to see here is more commonly than not is going to be a writing assignment. There's going to be some text that the student has produced, but it can also be a picture or an AutoCAD drawing or any other kind of computer file that they might have uploaded. But the most common type will be writing assignments. And that's what this is. This was a stipulation to define the term screencasting. And then there were some other specifications to list applications, list hardware and software requirements required. Okay, great. So now I remember what I assigned there. To grade these assignments, one of them's already been, the test student 1 submitted this assignment and been graded. But test student 3 has submitted something that has not been graded. So how do I grade that? How do I see what the student has submitted and then assign a grade to it? Well, this little symbol here tells me that there is a submission that has not yet been graded. That's what that symbol means. So if I click on that symbol, I can then click on a little right arrow that pops up in the cell, the gradebook cell. And that will give me the option, it will give me the status of this, like if it's late or it's missing, or if the student has been excused this assignment because of illness or something like that. But it will also give me access to the SpeedGrader, which is my grading interface in Canvas. For those of you who remember the inline grading tool in Blackboard, this is the same thing. It's literally the same tool. Both Blackboard and Instructure contract with a third-party vendor by the name of Box Incorporated, who produced this inline grading tool. And so it looks an awful lot like what you had in Blackboard and operates about the same way. You can zoom in if you have trouble reading this. It's often the case for me anymore. You can full screen it so you can see it better. You can read or view the entire submission, assuming it is something that this submission is a type of file that Canvas can give you a preview of here in this window. If it's not, if this were like an AutoCAD drawing, Canvas would not be able to display it effectively here. But Canvas does give you the option to download that file to your own computer, where you presumably have an application that can open it up and allow you to view it effectively. But for more common types of submissions, Canvas can just display the content that the student has, of the file that the student has uploaded, or the content of the typing that the student did in a text box right in this frame for you, so you don't have to download it and open it up in another window.
Dave?
Yeah, yes.
What is there a list of the type of files that Canvas accepts?
Canvas will accept just about any type of file, but if you want Canvas to be able to display it here, and if you want to be able to do some tricks I'm about to show you here, this file has to be one of a fairly limited number of file types.
What are they?
They are, let me pull that up for you here on another screen and bring it over. And here they are. These are the
Okay.
file types that are supported. Word documents, open office documents, ODF, ODT.
Well, JPEG doesn't work?
JPEG, no, JPEGs will
Whoa.
display, but you can't mark them up.
Oh my goodness.
PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheets, text
How
files.
can I get a copy of, where should I go to get a copy of this?
I'm going to put that link in the chat tool for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Right. Speed grader. File types. Okay, I just put that into the chat tool. Oh, and something I didn't mention about the chat tool earlier, you can save this chat log anytime and have a copy of it for yourself. In the lower right-hand corner of the chat box, and I can't show you this, unfortunately, because Zoom won't send that downstream, but in the lower right-hand corner of the chat box is a little menu icon. It's just 3 dots in a row, an ellipsis. If you click on that, you get an option to save chat. That chat will be saved to a folder called Zoom, which is automatically created on your computer in your default documents folder on either PC or Mac.
Oh,
You can
it's
find it in Windows Explorer in the Finder by looking for your documents folder, look for a folder called Zoom, and there'll be another folder inside that that has the chat log in it. And the folder that has the chat log in it will be dated in time so you can tell which one is which.
Thank
That I
you.
can show you. I can show you what that looks like. If you go to your documents folder, there'll be a folder called Zoom, and inside that will be hopefully not this many Zoom sessions. And the sessions are labeled by year, month, date, and time. So it's very easy to tell which one is which. And you open that up, and you'll have something, you'll be able to see the text file that has the chat log in. So
Thank
that's
you.
easy enough to find, and that link will be in there. A good thing to be able to do for any Zoom meeting, though. Very well. So we can read the document that the student has provided. If we want to make comments about this document that are localized within the document, we have these little tools here. We can do a point annotation, a highlight annotation, a free text annotation, a strikeout annotation, a free draw annotation, or an area annotation. Like the point annotation, if I click on that, I can drop that right here, and I can leave a comment. Which the student will be able to view later in context. A highlight annotation, you can highlight a number of words, a phrase, and then click on this little icon here and leave another comment, like I'm just making this up as I go along. Free text annotations allow me just to put text anywhere in the document. Strikeout annotation, I can strike out a word and replace it with something else, like, not that screenshot's a bad term here, but that shows you how that works. Free draw annotations, I can draw circles and then make a comment. Or I can draw, like I can highlight an entire paragraph and make a comment. So you can really mark up a document. This is the substitute for your blue pencil when you're grading math. And you can use it quite effectively. And it localizes the feedback to a particular part of the submission. You can also, of course, just assign you can just read the thing and assign a grade. That's a pretty good one. I'll give that a 9. You know, just put your back of your hand to the top of your head, gestalt it, and assign a grade. If you have created a rubric, you can pull up the rubric and see what you had decided to, how you decided to parcel out partial credit. If I go back and look at this assignment for a second, it said define screencasting, write a definition, but also list some applications and list hardware and software requirements. So I can think, well, maybe for the definition, it's total value of 10 points. So maybe for the definition, I get 5 points, and for the applications, 3, and the requirements, 2. I can codify that in a rubric, which I can create when I create the assignment. I'll show you how to do that. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Now I can go back to the speed grader where I was, and I can view that rubric. And I have divided, the rubric is rows and columns. Each row is a so-called criterion. Like one criterion is the definition here. Another is the applications. A third is the requirements. And then each column in the rubric past that is how well that is a measure of how well that criterion has been satisfied by this particular student. And the 3 levels of satisfaction I've listed here, so-called ratings, are meets expectations, partially meets expectations, and does not meet expectations. And of course, I can make these more informative. This text, I could, instead of meets expectations, I could type in something else. And then I can assign a number of points for each. So if I'm grading this sucker, the rubric is wonderful. Not only does it remind me what I had in mind when I wrote the assignment in terms of apportioning partial credit, it also allows me to be more consistent from student to student because I'm applying the same ratings equally to each student automatically. And it also allows me to grade this sucker in a hurry because all I have to do is, well, the definition was fine, but the applications explanation was only partially effective, and maybe they didn't do anything at all about requirements. So I can just click on those, and Canvas assigns the grade for me. When I save that, boom, there's the grade. I can override it if I want to, if I think the rubric has been unnecessarily draconian and at some point. I can do it, but it makes grading an assignment. If you take the time to create a rubric, it makes grading this assignment nothing when you go through. Bang, 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 and you're done, and you're on to the next student. And with the speed grader, I don't even have to go back to the grade book. I can just go to the next student by clicking this right arrow up here in the upper right, or go back to the previous student without having to go back to the grade book. If I've got all my submissions for this assignment in place and I just need to grade them, bang, 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 I don't have to keep going back to the full gradebook display and back and forth. I can just go from student to student to student. And you can even set this up so that you don't see the student's name while you're doing it. So you grade totally objectively with no preconceptions about the identity of the student. I've never thought much of that particular strategy, but it's available to you. So if we have a rubric, grading becomes so much easier in the speed grader. You can provide global comments for the student, hopefully something more detailed than nice work, or in this case, fairly well done. That ultimately damning faint praise. But you're not limited in providing comments to typed comments in this box. You can also upload a file that has much more extensive comments. The file could be a Word document where you typed out very detailed comments, or it could be a screencast video where you pull the student's submission up on your computer screen and used annotation tools in the screencasting program to mark it up and blue pencil it for them while you're talking about it in real time, which is tantamount to having the student sitting there, every student sitting there in front of you and getting personalized feedback. Really cool. And you can then save that video file and upload it using this file attachment button here to the student's grades tool, so that the student can view that video later and see and get wonderfully detailed feedback on that writing assignment or whatever. You can record a brief talking head video for your student right here using this media comment tool. If I click on that, I have to pick the right web. I've got multiple webcams here, and Zoom will prevent me from using my main webcam for this, but I can use a secondary webcam that I have here. It's not as good a webcam, but it'll do. And this would not be a problem if you weren't trying to grade at the same time you were in a Zoom meeting. Otherwise, you need two webcams to do this. You have to make sure that Canvas is hearing you. You may have to pick an appropriate microphone, but usually it will just work. You start recording, it counts you down. Hi, that was reasonably good work, but there are some areas you need to concentrate on. Check the rubric feedback to see what those are. Click finish. You can play a little bit of it. Hi, that was reasonably good work, but there are some areas you need, and then you can save it. And it becomes a part of the student's grading record. And it will appear here to remind you what you sent, and it will also appear in their grades tool. And finally, my favorite, you can provide text comments without having to type them. Fairly well done. And submit. That only works if you're using the Chrome web browser, because Chrome has a speech recognition tool built into it that's not available in other browsers at the present time. Or if it is, Canvas doesn't integrate with it. So you can do comments very easily, very quickly. And of course, the number that you've either entered manually or has been entered through the rubric is then, when you hit submit, that's submitted to the grade book. And when you go back and look at it, there it is. That's the one we just graded right there. And that's in there. And all of that, all those comments, all those markups and everything are in there as well. So when the student views this in their grades tool, they see everything that you've provided to them. The speed grader, speed graders used more with homework assignments than anything else. So that's why I went through it in great detail there. But you can also use the speed grader to grade discussions. Here I have 3 students who have participated in the course discussion. What could I do with screencasting? To grade each student, you start the same way as you did with the assignment. You just click on that little submission icon, click the right arrow, go to the speed grader, and here you'll see every post that that student made in this discussion forum. You can read them. That looks to be looks to meet the requirements of this. So I can give them a 10 there. I can add a comment, a global comment, in the same way I did before, and I could submit that grade. If I want to see these posts in context, I can view the full discussion right from within the speed grader without leaving the speed grader. So this is the entire discussion, so I can see where this student's posts fit in if I need to. And then I can submit the grade, and I can go on to the next student. And this one's done even better. I should have given the other one a 9 and this one a 10, and so on. You don't have the markup tools here. This is just look at it, read it, add general comments or video comments or speech to text comments, and then move on. You can use a rubric with this, though. And finally, let's go back to the grade book. That's what this little icon in the upper left-hand corner allows us to do. And we can grade tests if necessary. Let me just say all assignment groups here, and I'll go find a test. Now I'm seeing everything again. This is a handy little filter, though, when you're grading. If you're determined to grade assignments instead of tests or discussions at any given time, for instance. So let's look for a quiz. Well, like here's a quiz, and that quiz has been graded. And here's a quiz, that quiz has been graded. Those are apparently all objective questions. But this quiz apparently contained at least one subjective question, probably an essay question. So Canvas can't assign a grade here yet. So same thing again, you click on the icon, you go to the speed grader for this submission, and this is how you bring up the student's test paper, quote unquote paper. And you see what the student got right and wrong, so you can evaluate their work. But question 3 here was a short answer question, actually, which the system can't grade. So you read the answer. You can have a rubric over here for this if you wish. You can apply comments, same stuff, and you just, within the test, you grade this question. That looks pretty good. Give that a 9 and update scores. So now the student's score goes from a 4, which was what they got from the objective questions, to a 13. Notice I can't override that here, but I can go over here and override it if I wish by overriding individual questions. Within the test, if that's a 100-question test, you're probably not going to want to do that. if you can avoid it. Be a good idea to put the essay questions together somewhere so you can find them quickly in that event. But then you just submit that to the grade book, and that quiz is now graded.
Dave,
Yes,
um,
that's that quiz. Yes.
on discussions, if when you
Mhm.
do a discussion, is it a pinned discussion or is it just in that center area?
It's any graded discussion, whether it's pinned or not.
Does pinned mean that students can interact with each other or not?
No, all pinned means is where it's displayed in your, well, in your and the students' discussion tools.
Threw up someplace.
If we go to the discussion tool, you have an area for pinned discussions, which always stay at the top of the page, and the rest of the discussions. And this is purely a matter of where it displays on this page. It doesn't have anything to do with whether it's gradable or whether students can interact through it, whatever. That's determined in other ways. Pinned just means it's up at the top of the page. So it's something important. You want to always be at the top of the page. Also, you can, within pinned discussions, you can determine what order the discussions are presented to the student in. If they're down here in the regular discussions area, it's just the last one. The one at the top is the last one that students participated in. And you can't control the order down here. It won't let you. But if I pin this one by just moving it up into the pin discussions here, now I can determine the order in which these display. That's all that pinned means.
Okay.
Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Good. Okay, let me check my outline over here. Yep, I'm at the bottom of it. I hate it, but I'm have to leave right now to go attend the Distance Education Steering Committee meeting. You've had lots of good questions today. Thank you for those. I see a few in the chat tool that I have not been able to get to. And I will answer those by email since you were kind enough to provide me with your email addresses. I will have this discussion, I will save this chat log, and I will get back to you with those answers. And you're welcome to send me anything else that you have questions about in email. Let me put my email address in here, last thing. Most of you probably have it, but just in case. There it is to everyone's right at the bottom of the chat tool. Do save that before you leave so that you'll have that. And I will be delighted to hear from you. I'm trying to, things have settled down a little bit since 2 weeks ago, so I'm able to keep up with my email better right now. And I'm not spending 8 hours a day online on Zoom as I was at that time. So teaching classes like this. So I have a lot more bandwidth available to handle email. So please don't hesitate to contact me. And I thank you so much for coming today. Still got 11 of us here right at the end. And I will look forward to hopefully seeing you in another session soon. We're going to continue these right on through, at least through probably the end of June, which is when my contract with the district runs out. But we'll see about, and we'll probably be scheduling more. We have a schedule in place right now, and Mary Kingsley is sending out emails every week with the week's schedule, and we'll continue to do that. But we will probably add some more to that. And if there's something you'd especially like to see covered in a in one of these seminars, if you would like to, if you want to send me an email to that effect, I'll pass that along. And if we get a bunch of requests for a particular topic that's not on the schedule, we'll consider, we'll do our best to add it. So take care. Enjoyed working with you today, and I'll hope to see you again soon.